Hello friends and happy Pride. Last year, I so desperately wanted to share about coming out as bisexual and I was too nervous, and so it is time. I'm gonna share my experience coming out in my late 20s, why I think it took me so freaking long, my experience with my first and current girlfriend, looking back, ways that I should have known I was very gay, tips and thoughts for people that are exploring this for yourself, and so much more. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Jack and I create content about lifestyle, mental health, and well-being. Not new, welcome back. So I'm 30 now and I came out around 27, and when I say came out, I mean sort of like came out internally to myself, like started realizing that I am very much not straight. Up until this past year, I exclusively dated men and really just thought I was straight, which is so confusing. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long to figure it out, and I think there's a few different pieces here. So one is compulsory heterosexuality. Kind of this experience of just like not a lot of representation and just like you're told that you're straight, you're assumed that you're straight, and so just kind of like going with that. If you're not familiar with it, look it up more. I'm not gonna do a great job of explaining it here, but I do think that played a really big role for me. I mean, I grew up in a really rural town, never saw any queer couples. When I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of representation in the media, and it's honestly just something that like didn't really question, which is kind of sad. It's definitely sad, and it's weird to look back on. I also wonder, and this is very niche, so sorry if this doesn't apply to you, I won't stay on it too long, but I also wonder if my ADHD played any type of role in it, just because I feel like I developed later in a lot of different areas, like really spacey and just kind of like going through life, and I kind of feel like that experience sort of contributed to me just not realizing until later. Lastly, I think the way that I experience sexual attraction is different than a lot of people that I talk to. So I think because I don't experience like really strong sexual attraction like pre-touch, I don't have that experience of like, oh, I want to hook up with that person regardless of gender, and never have. Sex is not something that's like actively on my mind or something that I like experience really physically, again, like prior to physical touch with people. And so the way that I experienced like attraction or interest in people, the way I experienced it in men was more through crushes and more through like, oh, I want to like hug them or get to know them, or more aesthetic attraction, romantic attraction, occasional sexual attraction, but again, not really in the way that I hear other people talk about it. Because it wasn't that like super obvious attraction, I just didn't realize that that is what was happening. And because I wasn't like exposed to a lot of queer people, it just like wasn't even really going through my brain. I created a question sticker on my Instagram. Someone asked me, how did you know you were bi? Like, how did you specifically go from sort of like thinking you might be to knowing for sure? It was definitely a process. I do want to say, and this definitely may not be the case for everyone, but I think oftentimes if you think you might be bi, you might be bi. Like, I don't think a lot of straight people spend a lot of time thinking about whether or not they're not straight. So take that if it lands for you. I, of course, think it's important to go through the process and to explore for yourself in multiple ways. For me, it kind of started a lot over like realizing I had crushes on women in TV shows, and really just kind of like slowly realizing like these are crushes. Like, I experienced this in the same way that I experience men characters. Bridget Lundy Payne and Ruby Rose were definitely two people where I was like, yep, I am attracted to these people and this is a real thing. And I remember kind of eventually talking to one of my friends about it, and we were just both obsessed with queer TV shows and like nonstop talking about it. Also, TikTok actually played a role in me discovering that I'm queer, and I feel kind of embarrassed to say that, but I just want to be honest about it because it's true. I just kept having lesbian content, queer content, bisexual content like coming up on my TikTok non-stop, and it just all resonated so much, and I was like clearly attracted to certain people and just was like, yeah, these feel like my people. This feels really right, and I feel like really really cozy and good here. And this was kind of like right at the beginning of the pandemic. When I was really trying to figure this out early on, I was in a relationship with a man, and so it was this like big tension in myself that felt really confusing. I did come out to him earlier than most people, and we sort of had a conversation about it, and we both kind of knew that it was this thing that I may need to explore at some point, and neither of us really knew what that meant. But that made it a little harder because my exploration was more just like in my brain, and again, like exploring if I really had crushes on like characters or things like that. And I think like at that point I knew, like I definitely knew already that I was not straight. And there was parts of me that kept being like, what if you're making it up? What if this isn't true? What if X, Y, and Z? And when my ex-partner and I broke up, I was like, okay, this is my chance. I'm gonna explore this and figure it out for certain, even though again, like I was already identifying as queer. But at that point I was having questions like, am I bi? Am I a lesbian? Am I asexual? Like I have no idea what's going on. So yeah, when my partner and I broke up, after a little bit of time, got on this app called Her, which is a queer dating app, but it's also like a place to make friends with other queer people. So I made friends with some queer people on there that I'm still dear friends with, and I also met my current girlfriend. And I mean, I told her exactly where I was at, and she was super supportive. Being with my girlfriend has just been such an amazing experience for so many reasons. Just like falling in love with a woman. Of course, you know, I fell into that stereotype of like the first woman I dated now like being in like a long-term relationship with, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It is the safest relationship I've ever been in. It's so loving and nurturing and healthy. I started creating this video before all the questions came in on Instagram, but this one just came in and I want to at least touch on it super briefly. The first interaction was really through text, and we really eased in. So we were like texting a lot and then moved to phone calls and then video calls, and then eventually had her come over, and our first date was actually watching Twilight and eating a bunch of snacks. So it was pretty perfect, and we kind of just like really slowly eased into everything else. So I was really nervous, but it felt like as I got comfortable with one thing, I was like ready for the next, and then I was comfortable with that and ready for the next until it turned more into like sexual stuff. I was so nervous to have a sexual experience with a woman. I was like, what does that even mean? I'm gonna suck. I don't have any experience. I'm just terrified, like petrified. And it was so much more natural and intuitive than I ever would have thought. That's the best way I can describe it, just like natural and intuitive. And I also realized that even if you've had a ton of sexual experience with someone, you haven't had a sexual experience with that person. And so the best way that you can get to know them and their needs and desires and etc. is just to ask and to communicate and to listen to their body. I did a lot of that, but it was pretty great. It doesn't matter if you haven't had experiences, you can totally figure it out, just knowing that it will come likely a lot more naturally and intuitively to you than you think. It was really fun and interesting to see like the role that I kind of landed in a little bit more when the gender expectations were taken away. And then obviously things with us progressed, and it was very much confirmed that I am very much attracted to women in many, many ways. That was kind of my process in figuring it out. I don't think it requires confirming to know. If you know, you know. Your sexuality is valid, whether or not you're in a hetero relationship or a queer relationship, whether you've ever experienced being with someone. If you know, and that's enough. And I wish someone told me that earlier so I could stop like the spinning in my head. My experience with coming out was really gradual. I definitely told people prior to being in a relationship with my girlfriend, but then when I was in my relationship with her, that kind of catapulted like a bigger, more public coming out. But I had come out, like I said, to my partner. I think I had come out to like a good amount of close friends pretty early on, and just like shared like, hey, like this is what I'm moving through, and was really supported. I was really nervous every time I had to share with someone, even though I know my friends and I know my family and I knew it would be met with love. There was always a question of like, will they think differently of me? all of these questions and fears, and I have just been so lucky, and I'm so privileged to have friends and family and community that was so supportive and on board. Most people in my life were like, yeah, bro, we're not surprised, like that tracks for you. And they were all like, is that offensive? And I was like, no, that's actually really validating. Like, for me at least, it felt really good for people to be like, yeah, I'm not surprised, no biggie, cool, that makes sense, like whatever. So that was my experience with most people. My parents were super supportive, super chill about it. I came out on my Instagram, which is like my business Instagram, Authentically ADHD, earlier on, and that didn't feel super scary because it's like mostly strangers or like internet friends. But only recently did I come out on my personal Facebook page. I'm from a super small town, and while there's so many amazing people, there's also a lot of really homophobic people, and that felt a lot more vulnerable, but I did it and it felt really good. I just want to name, like, I know this is not the experience for most people, for a lot of people, and I know that I have so much privilege in what my experience was with this, and if you had a harder experience or fear having a harder experience, my heart just really feels for you. I'm so sorry, and you deserve so much better. Okay, this is the part that I feel most excited to talk about. Signs that I was not straight that I somehow missed, because I just think it's so weird and funny and bizarre that these things didn't click earlier, and I've definitely spoken with other people who have had similar experiences. So I would love to hear in the comments if any of these experiences resonate for you, and also if you have any signs you were not straight that you somehow missed. One of the most obvious ones is I used to always say, I think I could love anyone. Straight people don't say that, and it's like, that is such a gay thing to say, but for some reason in my brain I still thought I was straight but thought I could love anyone. So it was like, I guess I was like, I don't know what was going on up here, but man. And I used to experience a lot of jealousy, and it's so interesting now because now that I've come out, I have learned that that jealousy was not jealousy. That was not me wanting to be them, that was me wanting to be with them. And that is so mind-blowing for me and so funny to look back on. I remember one time like talking about my jealousy to a friend, and her just being like, I don't know, I just don't really notice girls that much. Like, it seems like you just are paying a lot of attention to like girls walking in the room. And I was like, oh, I don't know, I must just be like really jealous and comparing myself. No, honey, you were not. You were attracted to them. You were interested in them. That's why you were paying so much attention to them. On that same note, I used to always say, I don't know, I just feel like women are just objectively more beautiful. Come on. I think this one is really common, but I was like such a good ally, and I would go to Pride and I would post about queer stuff and just like think I was this like A+ amazing ally. And enough said. I also was just like obsessed with queer people and queer culture. So I can think back to times where I would like go to parties and there would be a lesbian couple, and I would just like hang out with them the whole time and just be like so intrigued and just like so interested and just felt like so drawn to them. And I probably had crushes on at least one of them as well in retrospect, but a little sus. On that note, I also used to just constantly say I had girl crushes, like thinking that they weren't real crushes, which is probably a lot of internalized homophobia there. Like, I could unpack that a lot, but like, no, girl crushes are not a thing. Girl crushes are not a thing. If you have a crush, it's a crush. It's not like a fake crush. It's not less than because they are a girl. It's a crush. Okay, a pretty big one that I'm not gonna go into a lot of depth on here is pretty early on. I don't know how old I was, maybe like 12, like very, very young, like before I was definitely before I was like sexually active. One of my childhood friends and I would kind of like experiment, and one of us would pretend we were a guy and the other of us would pretend we were not. But that was definitely a sexual experience that I think like it at the time and up until recently I thought we were like just playing or whatever, but no, like that was me being sexually active. Like it wasn't anything like super intense, but enough that I'm like, oh wow, like I actually think my first sexual experience was technically with a girl, with one of my childhood friends, and I definitely enjoyed it. Why did that not click? Like why did I not realize that? Like we were not just like, it wasn't like we were like just playing house, like that was real. And you know, I've learned since that like she's also hooked up with other women as she's gotten older. Okay, and one last thing, I'm sure there's so many, and again, add yours in the comments, but one last thing that is really messed up on my part, honestly, is I always had this experience of feeling like lesbians were hitting on me. And I would always say to my friends, I don't know what it is, I feel like lesbians are just drawn to me, like I must give gay energy or something. I can't with myself. Of course you gave gay energy. You were probably making intense eye contact with them and looking them up and down and flirting with them. Of course they were drawn to you. I just can't. Someone asked if I moved from like one spectrum to the other in terms of bisexuality. So I'm kind of taking this question as like, how do I experience my sexuality? And I want to start by naming everyone experiences it so differently, and there's no right or wrong way. I don't think I really experience it as like swings in one way or the other. I think I experience it, and I'm still figuring this out, like this is still really new for me. However, I do feel like my sexuality overall feels very fluid. There's no label other than queer that really feels super right for me. Bi or pan works fine, but I honestly feel like it's so much more energy based for me. I guess there's certain things about any and all genders I could really like, and there are some preferences, I suppose, but for the most part, it is so energy based for me. And I tend to be attracted to people who can switch between energies and flow between energies and kind of be more dominant and then less dominant and then kind of like handle it and then I handle it, and kind of just like, I like being able to just be like flowy in the energies, both like energetically and aesthetically as well. I do think at this point in my life, if my girlfriend and I were to break up, which hopefully we don't, I would lean more towards being interested in women and non-men. And like I would probably actively look more in that direction, but I would be really open to any and all possibilities. Someone asked if I still deal with any internalized homophobia or biphobia, and the answer is definitely yes. I actually haven't done like so much processing about this, so I'm gonna take this as a prompt to like process it a little bit more, but the short answer is absolutely yes. And especially with like being bi and there being so much biphobia, I definitely had a really hard time accepting that and feeling like I needed to like fit in another category, or I needed to like decide, or I was making it up, or no, you're actually a lesbian, or no, you're actually straight. And that was a really hard process to kind of move through. I also definitely still feel really nervous sometimes to share with people, and not only because I'm scared of how they'll react, but because I'm scared that they'll think differently of me, especially men. I'm scared that they'll think differently of me, and anyone, honestly. I know that's a little bit of internalized homophobia, because if I didn't feel like there was like something wrong with me, why would I be worried that they're going to think that something is wrong with me? And so that's something to still unpack a little bit. The last thing I'm going to cover are just some thoughts for you if you're starting to or in the process of exploring your identity. First of all, I just want you to know you are not alone. I know it can be really confusing and just feel like a lot to navigate and go through. Also, I want you to know it's never too late. So if you're in your 20s, if you're in your 50s, and if you're in your 80s, I don't care. It's never too late to start to explore this for yourself. I said this earlier, but I just want to reaffirm that your sexuality sexuality is valid regardless of who you are with or who you have been with. You know yourself and you get to claim whatever identity feels right for you. I want you to know it is so liberating when you start to claim your identity and claim what feels right for you. Even if there's no labels attached to that, just like fully being who you are. I have never felt more like myself, and it feels so good. And so I just want that for you if you want that for you. And even if you don't feel like you can or you are ready to come out externally to like share with people, I would encourage you to practice being truthful to yourself. It can be really easy to be in lack of acceptance around what's going on because it can feel scary and all of these things, but you deserve to be truthful to yourself and to own whatever is your truth, at least internally. Try to find safe spaces and safe people that you can just be like, hey, like I'm thinking about this, I'm curious about this. A lot of people who are already out and identifying as queer will be happy to talk with you about it. I can't obviously speak for everyone, but I certainly am. So feel free to send me an email or leave a comment if you're having questions or if you just want someone to sort of share with. I'd be happy to be that ear for you. And the last piece is just to find queer community. So even if you're not sure if you are queer, just finding queer community to start like getting involved was super, super helpful for me, and I continue to start seeing myself more and more. I remember going to a gay bar in Boston and just being like, these are my people. Like I feel so at home, and it's really, really special. Thank you so much for hearing my story, and I hope some of it was validating to you or helpful. I upload new videos every week, so please subscribe and let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.